Right, so here we have two components that are perhaps rendering the same kind of information. We have a list of courses and a course grid, and we'd like to be able to do is perhaps toggle between the two. But before we do that, we're going to have to encapsulate these components into their own set, into their own dedicated component, so that they can be toggled between the two. So what we're going to do is that we're going to create additional components, right? That not necessarily maintain their own state. Notice that this right here only really needs a parameterization of the list of courses that it needs to iterate over. So it's not going to need its own state information. So it's not going to be implemented as a class. Instead, it's going to be just a simple functional component. All right, so let's do that. We'll create a course list component. And by saying component, that's kind of a hint that this is not going to maintain its own state. Okay, so here we'll have an import React from React. And this is just a plain old function. So this will be CourseListComponent. This is a function that is going to receive as an argument the list of courses from the outside, right, which is going to be used for rendering this list. So we're just going to copy this. We're just going to paste it in here. All right, so that's what's going to return, and it's going to export into the default the course list component. And let's fix this a little bit. So really, this state, we don't have a state, right? We are receiving just as a parameter. So I'm going to remove that. So there it is. So we're iterating over the courses, and we are just returning a UL of multiple line items. Now that we have that, we can replace this course list, right, with this new component we just built. So this will be CourseListComponent, and we need to pass as argument this.state.courses. There we go. Let's see how it renders. Notice that it renders identical to what we had earlier. We like to be able to do the same thing with the course grid, so let's do that. Let's build another component. We'll call it the CourseGridComponent. CourseGridComponent. This will be import React from React, and we'll create the function. This will be CourseGridComponent, which will take our argument the same list of courses, and what's going to return is this cart of decks. Right? So we're going to grab that. I'm going to remove that. I'm going to paste it right here. I'm going to export this. Export to the default, the CourseGridComponent. There it is. Now we can refer to it here as the CourseGridComponent. I'm going to pass in the same courses. There we go. And here, instead of using this.state in the CourseGrid component, we just use courses, which we're receiving as argument from the outside world. Notice that they render identical to each other. As before, one more thing, perhaps this should also live right in the course list component. We'll put it right here. Notice that it's complaining because, again, we are returning more than one element. Right? So we'll let's wrap this in with a single element so that React doesn't complain. There we go. And we'll do the same thing with the course grid. Let's grab that. Let's put it inside of the course component. We'll put a div, course grid here, and we'll wrap this and close this with a div down here. Let's see, we have this div right there. Excellent. If we go back, notice that it renders as before. But now now what we have is these two components, the course list component and the course grid component, and we could perhaps surround this around a mechanism that would allow us to toggle between the two.